Hi, I'm Esther.
And I'm Sean.
I write about AI news here at Tech Target.
And I edit Esther's stories.
We're here to talk to tech experts about everything AI, from open and closed models to AI agents and who's ahead in the generative AI race.
And even the elusive AGI.
We've got it covered, right, Sean?
Yep, we've got it covered.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Targeting AI podcast. Today, we are speaking to Craig Clair, an AI analyst at Forrester Research. At Forrester, Craig covers automation, AI technology, and the future of work. Before Forrester, Craig worked as a vice president at ADT. He is also a published author. In 2019, he published Invisible Robots in the Quiet of the Night. His latest book, Random Acts of Automation, comes out in January. Very exciting. Thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast, Craig.
It's my pleasure, Esther. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Esther gave me the first shot today. So to kick it off, we want to learn a little bit more about you and who you are. And so can you talk about your journey with AI technology and automation and what first piqued your interest about it and kind of when? And I'm assuming that was before the explosion of Gen AI. So maybe it's a process of going from AI to automation to Gen AI.
You know, I have been an analyst at Forrester for, believe it or not, 18 years. And before that, I was with various software companies. And, so I've been in the tech industry for quite a while. Probably I first really got into AI when I was covering the RPA markets. In fact, the Invisible Robots, which you were nice enough to mention, book came out because I was going to these conferences. I was speaking at some of them, and there were thousands of people there, and they were all building RPA bots, and no one seemed to know about it. And these were very interestingly, cloud-based software apps that were actually doing a lot of work that people used to do, mostly in the mid and back office. So that's why I called them the invisible robots in the quiet of the night. And following that market, of course, a lot of RPA is considered sort of so-so technology. It doesn't transform much of anything. It doesn't create new industries like a lot of automation has done in the past. So the future for RPA obviously was to start to incorporate AI. So I was really following that trajectory. The first thing that the RPA market did was incorporate, document understanding, or what we call intelligent document extraction, which is a very practical form of AI. I was, following, those platforms and talking to clients about how they can use that. And then, of course, Gen AI exploded onto the scene. I'd actually started to write about something we called autonomous workplace assistants, which were slightly more intelligent RPA bots. And then when Gen AI hit, we renamed them AI agents. And now we're speaking about agentic process automation, as the next thing. So it's been kind of a sort of gradual growing interest to me, and I've always been focused on what the effect on the workforce is for these technologies.
Very interesting. I just have a quick question. We are going to talk about fears surrounding AI technology later on. But when you were working with RPA and at the beginning of that, was there fear around RPA? Like, oh my goodness, we have robots. That the robots are going to take over our jobs. Is that fear also going on?
Well, I mean, the early books about robots and the workforce probably were in 2014, 2015, 2013 even. There's always been a fear of, you go back to 1930s, and John Maynard Keynes was, saying that the way automation is going from the industrial revolution, the biggest problem that people would have in the year 2020 or 2030, 100 years later, would be what to do with themselves. So this is not a new conversation at all. But it really ramped up in that 2015, 2016, 2017 timeframe, and many of us were putting out models to predict how many jobs would be lost due to automation. One of the revelations I've had is that you really can't do that. That it's really hard to do. No one really knows the rate, and it's not going to be about job replacement as much as job shifts. Disruption of the way people think about work today, which really got me into thinking about writing another book that would follow up. In a sense, giving up on the forecast, which tended to just scare everyone. And if you look at the economists who continually saw these forecasts of job displacement not being realized, that there's companies can't hire and keep people. So it really crystallized in my mind that let's talk about the shifts that workers will experience due to growing AI, and more importantly, what can they do about it?
Craig, quick question, quick follow-up to that. Do you subscribe to this philosophy or saying that the only people who are going to lose their jobs to generative AI are the ones who don't learn how to use generative AI?
No, I don't. I wouldn't embrace that. I think that this technology is going to affect four different categories of workers, which is sort of the framework for my book. Will infect them all differently. I do think that one of the skills that I recommend for the middle level, in particular, is to become AI operators. Is to learn how to use Gen AI to really start doing jobs that required more credentials than they have. So there's going to be an erosion for the what I call the digital elites, where you don't need that advanced degree because you're able to operate AI and be able to have the decision support you need to do higher level jobs. And we're seeing that already in the legal profession with paralegals. We're seeing that with nurse practitioners. We're seeing that already. It's really kind of the optimistic path for the middle. I do think that every category, probably not the service workers or what I call the human touch workers, but certainly the digital elite and the middle will absolutely need to embrace Gen AI and use it in order to advance their careers.
So you recently authored a report about the automation fabric required with agentic process automation, which you kind of mentioned earlier. Can you describe what you believe agentic process automation is? Is it the same as RPA? And what is the orchestration fabric that you think is required?
Yeah, so certainly RPA is not agentic. Agentic comes from the word agency, right? And that just means being empowered, having the ability to get to a goal, to make decisions on your own behalf. So agentic really means a level of autonomy that the automation has, which with the power of Gen AI, that's able to make connections and understand context and understand where it's going, understand how not to get stuck. That we're now at a period where we can start to think about having AI basically develop work patterns, and move towards a goal, without having a human in the loop. And that's really what agentic means. Now, people throw around that word a lot. There's been a long, a multiple decade history of academics and researchers studying agentic systems, the self healing and self determining systems. We've now adapted that and got the semantics a bit confused with AI agents, which are essentially more focused, more task oriented, that have this autonomous properties, but they really are automations that are focused on an end goal, and that's what an AI agent is. But really, all agentic really means is a level of autonomy that the automation has that it didn't have before.
If you think about hallucinations in regular generative AI, are those prone to enter the agentic world as well? And if so, how do enterprises guard against that? I know there's a stepped up, interest in governance, but these little agents running around, might they not veer off on their own autonomous paths and do things we don't expect them to?
Yes, although I point out to people that I've had coworkers that have hallucinated quite a bit in my working with them, but um, certainly that is the big issue. Trust is the big issue with all of this. But we're moving towards being able to control that level of hallucination that an agentic may have, an agentic and AI agent might have. And you do that from the information that you put into the prompt, which in a sense can narrow the scope of what the agent's trying to do. And then you have on the output processing side, you have guardrails that you put in where it's being checked for various things that are outside of a certain guardrail that's been established. We're all trying to figure that out. We're not there yet, but it looks very promising to be able to have constraints around the large language model that allows you to take care of its power, but also be sure it's not veering off, into bad areas. The other piece I recommend to a lot of clients is, focus these agentic processes on areas that are safer to begin with. So be able to assess a use case based on the downside of a mishap, and prioritize the use cases based on that. Develop confidence levels that you can calculate along the way, and that's really happening. A lot of those processes tend to be ones that are in the longer running processes, and they tend to be employee facing. So think of an employee coworker that's doing jobs maybe that you used to do, and less customer facing. Customer facing is where you have the most downside to brand, and you have the a customer could have a bad experience and take a different credit card out of their wallet. The employee is less likely to do something negative. So that's our advice on that.
I think we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about your AI predictions for next year. You just wrote something for a paper about it for Forrester, and the new year is coming quickly. And what's going to happen next year?
We're sort of narrowed to 5 predictions, and so there are a lot of predictions that I could make about automation in 2025. But probably one of them is that a lot of the agents will be built by citizen developers. I think we predicted 30% would be. So one of the powers of Gen AI is the ability to really move the dial for sort of low code development, so that you can use natural language. The friction that normally existed between the design and development person trying to deal with these applications and these websites and these IDEs, essentially, a lot of that's gone away with Gen AI, which you can now have a more natural interaction with. And a lot of this Gen AI is doing that. It's reducing the friction between humans and technology. So a lot of that is going to put strain on governance at companies as your citizen developers are actually moving to AI agents. We also think that physical automation is really benefiting as well, although more quietly. I mean, most of the interest and excitement is around cognitive automation. An agent that can do things that a sort of mid-level person was doing on a cognitive level. But when you start to combine Gen AI with a real robot, a real physical robot, whether it's a self-driving forklift, whether it's a security officer, an Android security officer, whether it's a drone, doing work, you start to take away one of the real barriers to physical automation, which is just not being very adaptable to conditions. It had to be very prescriptive, and now it can be more generalized in terms of its interaction. So physical automation was one of our predictions as well. We think that there's a new market that's emerging, and we're calling it agentic process orchestration, which is basically the fusing of a number of process tooling markets. And I know that you write about these areas quite a bit, but some are the RPA market, the business process management or DPA market, the iPaaS market, which deals with integration of software technologies. A new market that you have a lot of Gen AI startups coming in with AI agent platforms. Microsoft Copilot is an example of that, but there are literally, we're counting now 400 different platforms that can build agents. And you have the low code market, which is the process tools that are there to build websites, but also to build process applications as well. So they're all starting to look very similar. They all have low code, UIs that are driven by Gen AI. They all have RPA and DPA. They have orchestration. They have a native orchestration layer. And they all have AI agent building capabilities. So this new market we see developing, where probably the top providers from those 5 areas, will merge into a process orchestration market that will really focus on longer running processes, ones that require not just the human understanding that Gen AI gives you, but also the action components, some of which will be deterministic, like RPA and DPA APIs to workflows. But we see that as being kind of and really start to get going in 2025. So those are 3 of the 5.
Great. I'm looking forward to reading the paper. Actually, I see it. I think it's up on the post is up on your website, right? Yeah.
Probably.
It doesn't seem like you think that the buzz around AI agents will die down in the next year.
No, I don't. I do think it's a little bit out of control now, but I think there's pretty good reason for that. I think there'll be some softness in the general Copilot use cases where you're just infusing this intelligence to support a human in doing something, maybe summarizing their emails or creating a report, or doing some marketing creation. That's not going to give you the kind of business value that applying a real agent that's dealing with a longer running process will. So I think there'll be a bit of a shine off of the shiny object, as companies start to see, well, maybe I can't afford to pay $30 a seat for a Copilot that's, giving George a little more time in the back of the building. We really we have to figure out how to build, really do the orchestration to blend Gen AI in with these more substantive workflows that really drive the business. And so I think we'll enter a period of productivity where we'll start to build agents again with a platform like a agentic process orchestration platform to do so. But it's a little crazy right now, but that's always the case in tech, right? But there's something really strong there. This is pretty miraculous technology when you think about what it can do, the connections it can make. I've been in tech a long time, and I think it's the biggest change, towards, AGI that I've seen. And when you start to, really start to turn piles of data into conversations with people, and there's so many use cases, that insurance policy that you never read because it's 80 pages and of course 79 on what it doesn't cover, and 4 pages on what it does cover. But imagine being able to have a conversation with that. How long have I had this policy? How much does it really cost me? What do my heirs get if I should actually pass away? That's the opportunity for this, for an employee to have a conversation with standard operating procedures to get advice on what to do, or for standard operating procedures to be taken out of that PDF repository and actually put into a prompt and generate tasks that are then followed by an agent to get something done. The potential is really there.
I wonder if you can make the distinction between AI agents and Copilot, right? Because I think at the very beginning, before Microsoft kind of made their own distinction, it kind of felt like it was the same thing. Can you make that distinction? And then also, you kind of veer it into the use cases, and I wonder, as you were speaking, I'm like, isn't this getting a little bit too much into privacy, right? Can you speak also on that?
Yeah, so let me handle the first one first. So Microsoft got out quickly and called everything that it did basically Copilot, that had Gen AI associated with it. But we really think of 3 levels of agents. So I would call a Copilot that's just doing this simple augmentation of a human an agent. But I would also call a mid-level agent that has a combination of more of a hybrid combination of deterministic automation that's combined with non-deterministic Gen AI as sort of the sweet spot right now for a lot of use cases. And then full agentic is where you have an AI-driven workflow. That's really autonomous and gets to, an agentic capability. So, they're all agents. We actually have 5 categories of agents that we track. One of them is consumer advocacy agents. So this would be an agent that would get you a reservation at a restaurant. We have agents that are employee support. That's the ones that we're talking about here. There also are enterprise agents which work internally to a company, like what we call Turing bots that just help you write code, for example. That's a category of agents. And then we have fiduciary agents, which I think is a really interesting category, where you have an agent that's actually monitoring activity. That could be monitoring activity of sensors coming from the physical environment. It could be monitoring emails and text messages for an auditing process or compliance process. That's a really good area as well. So, there are 5 kind of use case categories for agents, and there are these 3 different spectrum of intelligence for agents. So I don't dismiss the value of the copilots or the simpler AI agents. I just think that what I'm hearing from clients is that they're a little disappointed with the business value. And that's where they're looking at, like I was talking to a bank the other day, and they have alerts coming out of a anti-money laundering system, which all banks are required to have. And that's when you have a transaction of a certain value. It has to be an alert's created, and then someone has to look at it and say, well, this isn't the bad guys using the financial system, right? Well, you have an agent that has enough context and can make the connections, can do a first level of review. There are way too many false positives in that normal scenario. Too many things had to go to a human. The AI agent can basically very safely make the connections and dismiss a lot of those false positives. So there's a lot here.
So you write a lot about automation and study and research it, and the AI world as well. So what are some of the fears, the biggest fears that people have and enterprises have about AI and automation? And what would you say discussion of those fears led you to write Random Acts of Automation? And speaking of the book, can you just talk a little bit about the book, even though it's a preview?
Yeah, I'd love to. And thank you for the opportunity to do so. I think the biggest issue, of course, is trust with all of this, and creating the guardrails on the input processing. Getting the right data into the large language model, and then doing a review on the outbound processing to be sure that the guardrails, it's within guardrails. It's really all one word. It's about trust. And right now, companies do not trust it to do an end-to-end process. Yeah, they're not there yet. And the industry's not there yet. What they do trust it to do is to do a significant part of the work, maybe 5 or 6 of the chevrons in a process, and have a human default, have a human in the loop. And then we're going to see that as a progression towards full agentic, which I think is going to be widely adopted by maybe 30% of companies by 2028. Yeah, that's the kind of time frame we're looking at. So to answer your question, no, I wasn't really concerned. Obviously, I'm a concern, but I didn't want to write a book about, understandable and safe AI or trust in AI, or really, I didn't want to write a business book. I wanted to write a book for workers. And it really started very simply. I was outside my house one day and waiting for my garbage to get picked up. And I noticed, the garbage trucks had gotten a lot more cool. They had these robotic arms that came down and grabbed the can and moved them in. But in this case, I'm just looking out there, and the garbage truck grabbed the can, but then it banged it on the wrong side, not in the opening, and it basically ate my garbage can. And it kind of struck me that, there are these random acts of automation. There are these aspects of automation that we're advancing a little too fast, and we need to really think through that. So the examples I use in the book, I talk about the famous Zillow example where they used AI to predict housing prices, and they had a tremendous meltdown of a huge division that they had. AI was not good at predicting houses. The housing market was too volatile to do that. I talk about Hertz when hundreds of people returned their car perfectly, and they were flagged as having stolen their car due to an automation glitch. And they'd be sitting at home watching football, and policemen would arrive at the door and put them in handcuffs. This wasn't like 5 times; it was like hundreds of times. I talked about Crowdstrike, of course, which was really brought down a good part of the technology infrastructure in a heartbeat, because we're doing things at scale, good and bad, that we've never done before. And really, the tech industry, when you think about it, doesn't have. My wife's an architect, and when I talk about enterprise architects, she says, well, they're not architects. They never sat through a 5-hour exam, So, enterprise architects aren't real architects. And, your software engineers are not real engineers. They never had any engineering training, most of them. Your data scientists, they have no scientific training, So, this industry has just been exploding so fast over the last decade or so. That we're ahead of ourselves. We're ahead of our skis in a lot of cases. So I started to write about that, but then I said, you know what? What good does that do anybody? Okay, you scare people. There's things that can happen bad with automation. There have always been things that happen bad with automation. But why can't I write about how to help workers? So I wanted to write a book that some mom could. Whose son has been playing video games in the basement for 6 months, could hand and say, look, read this. It'll help you, get out of the basement, and get a nice job. So when you look at the framework, and again, it's about disruption and about shifts. When you look at the framework, there are very specific skills that I'm recommending and paths I recommend for digital elite that'll have their challenges with AI, for the middle workers, that will have significant challenges, for the human touch workers, which are service workers in manufacturing, in warehouses, but they're also in healthcare, and also a fourth category, which are work-life pioneers, that are people that are dropping out of the workforce at great numbers, never seen before, that are basically ratcheting down their consumption and deciding to do either side hustles or to work in very different ways. Of course, the talent economy is part of that, and so each of those has very specific a blueprint on how they can leverage automation to achieve their life goals. So the way I deal with random acts is I talk about the automation trends that are most affecting each of those 4 worker categories, and it's not all bad. I mean, in the more physical world, for the service workers, automation has can really help them. The janitor of tomorrow will have a lot cleaner job. The 3Ds, dirty, dull, and dangerous. A lot of the physical automation is really going to help that category of worker. I think in the middle, we talked about being an AI operator. I talk about leveraging device skills more. That's what everyone seems to have, are device skills. Being able to go for that better position that AI opens up to you. Yeah. And for the digital elite, I make very specific recommendations about not getting too comfortable at home. You have to develop a hybrid presence, a hybrid human and non-human presence. That will benefit you. As you build your network to maintain your relevance, as AI takes on more of the things you learn to get to the credentials that you have are becoming less and less important. You have to leverage more of your human skills in different ways. I talk a lot about critical thinking, and there's a reason we're here today, is because a Russian guy, back in the Cold War, got a signal that his instructions were to launch a nuclear attack against the United States. That was the signal that he got. Very, very clear protocol. And he didn't launch it because he thought critically about the possible errors that might occur. And he did not do it. And basically it was an error. And we're still here today because of that. So critical thinking, which is not just for the digital elite, which is a great misconception I try to deal with. Everyone can benefit from thinking critically about their environment and their context, and has to, whether you're a human touch worker, whether you're a middle worker, or whether you're a digital lead. And there's a lot of great research going on for how to apply critical thinking. That's just a sample. One of the guys I talk about in the middle, my favorite guy is Enzo. Enzo, was a top-ranked machinist. He was top of his class, and then they outsourced his machine tooling shop to globalization, and he was forced to seek other type of work. Wasn't as good, but then he got hired back like 4 years later, and in that period, the machines that he worked had changed so significantly that they required G coding. It was all in the setup, and he had the hand-eye coordination you absolutely needed on the previous machines, but not the ability to handle the technology change that had occurred in the machine. And there were, younger kids that tried to teach him, but he went to the boss and said, you know what, I just can't do this. And so now he's driving a cab for Lyft. So all of these positions are going to have to deal with a ramping up of technology. So they're going to need a new set of skills to do that. And that's what this book's about.
Okay, Craig, it just occurred to me while you were talking that you've explored the role of automation and AI in everyday people's lives, workers, people's with using devices. I assume you meant the ubiquitous smartphones, and so I'm basically married to my iPhone. Like a lot of people, I spend an ungodly amount of hours on it every day, and I authorized Apple Intelligence the other day, and now it's summarizing my emails. Like, it's great. It's like instantaneous, like quantum leap forward almost. And then I can record calls on the iPhone with a transcript, stuff that you couldn't do 2 months ago. So, so you talk about consumers and workers and enterprises. Do you think maybe because Apple has this little head start on device level Gen AI that they will be maybe moving forward even faster, or maybe into enterprises, just to pick a vendor? I mean, it's probably going to be available on Android as well, but this
Yes.
kind of what effect is
Well, the thing that I
edge?
found, I interviewed workers at Popeyes and McDonald's, and they don't want to work in those jobs anymore. They want to use their devices. And they have the ability to do so, and the devices get smarter all the time. I think there's a world out there available to a lot of folks that may think they don't have the skills, but when they really think about it, because they've been told that their skills are learning to code, and learning to code is not going to do it, obviously, going forward, because Gen AI is going to take over a lot of that needed skills. But actually, being able to manipulate your device, being comfortable with apps, and because the friction between the apps and the websites is going to diminish with Gen AI, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for lots of folks that don't have higher level degrees to do really, really good work and have very satisfied lives. Yeah.
I found it interesting, kind of like the journey you took to be able to, write the book when you talked about the truck, like, doing destroying your garbage can. Do you think that the technology should be moving as fast as it is moving? I know that the people that you spoke to, obviously, they would like to do get in line with the way the technology is moving, but should we perhaps slow down? Even when you talk about agentic AI, is it moving too fast? Because you're talking about
I
2028.
think it is.
So is there a way to slow it
yeah,
down?
I think it is. And I suggest that don't look for government to slow it down. Don't look to business to slow it down. I think business is going to do what business always does. They're going to try to be as efficient as possible. And I think government's going to be too slow to deal with the juggernaut of the tech industry. And a lot of that innovation in the tech industry is we benefit from every day. You might write a much longer book on all the benefits of automation. Even though Enzo doesn't have a job anymore, his water is cleaner, his car is safer. It's just our lives are being enhanced all the times with automation. So one of the takeaways is that we have to look to ourselves to prosper in this new age. Do not look to the government to be able to put in regulations to deal with the pace of technology. Do not look at business to operate any differently than they were. I do recommend. I talk to business all the time, right? That's what we do at Forrester. I recommend that we first understand whether we should automate or not before we go and automate. I think that self-service. I have a whole chapter on how we're breaking negative barriers with customer self-service. You look at the trend lines, and only the affluent will get humans. We're basically turning huge percentage of population into employees on their first day of the job, and it's unconscionable to watch a 70-year-old person trying to read 4-point font off the avocado to scan it at a checkout at a grocery store. So there are a lot of things that are pushing too fast. I'd like to see them slow down, but I don't have any confidence that they will, which is why each of us needs to take it upon ourselves. There are 4 sections of the book, and one actually deals with the mental state of employees, and that's divided into 3 chapters: one on trust, one on isolation, as we get more and more isolated as we spend more and more time online, and one is on invasion, which is there's just significantly. I'm really worried about a lot of the technology being developed become invasive for workers being monitored. You already have instances of predictive analytics being used in the fast food area to tell workers not to come in, even when they're on a bus already coming in to work. So there's I write about a woman in Australia who had, without her knowledge, surveillance software on their PC, and they had a dashboard of showing number of days late, number of days not working at all of this complete dashboard of her activity, which she said wasn't true. So there's going to be a lot of this technology, the same kind of technology that is used to manipulate us on social media, where you're basically being encouraged down certain paths by being shown things based on what you've seen, for the purposes of driving commercial activity. You're starting to see that same algorithmic reach go into the workforce, where you're being motivated to work in a certain way, and you're being compared to your peers to motivate you. And so there's a level of invasiveness for this technology that's going to create some negative mental effects on workers. And it's very subtly moving in. I do think it's moving too fast in a number of angles.
That's a pretty cool analogy you just made. So you've studied the future of work. You've studied automation. What's going to be the net outcome? Are we going to lose more jobs than we new kinds of jobs with automation taking care of some of the more menial jobs? Like the thing I've heard about truck drivers, like autonomous trucks, right? So truck drivers might go away, but you might need truck controllers or more trucks to do the last mile, more drivers to do the last mile stuff. So it seems to me like you got benefits and costs from automation, but are the benefits in the long run going to outweigh the cost for the future of work?
So here's my take. I have one chart that looks at the 4 levels. It shows the digital elite, despite having AI nibble at their jobs from the middle moving up, that they'll have a net increase in jobs going forward. There's just, the world's trying to digitally scale, and it needs their digital elite talent to do so. The middle is going to continue to erode. It's been eroding for decades due to globalization, due to the invisible robots I talked about before. And this automation is going to accelerate the movement of people from the middle to the services economy, or the frontline service workers. Now, there will be a percentage that will move from the middle to become digital elites as they become AI operators, but the numbers don't work out well for the middle. Although there are economists at MIT that disagree with that. They think that there's actually going to be a net increase of middle workers due to what we're talking about. I don't see it that way. I don't think that thousands of people are going to stumble out of the call center and become data scientists anytime soon, right? Maybe a percentage of them will. We have 28 million contact center workers, and I think that's the middle. I think 40-50% of them will be gone in 5 years. The way Gen AI is handling customer self-service, the current trends. The real benefit, though, is that the human touch workers, which are, again, physical service workers, as well as across many, many industries, right? And say, those working in healthcare. All this automation is going to help them be more productive. We're going to need more and more of them. Even though we have this automation that's going to help, physical automation is going to help them. I think the human agility, which is really what they're doing more, they're doing less cognitive and more human agility, is still going to be very expensive to replicate in physical robotics for some time. So I think you're going to see a growth in that segment. Unfortunately, a lot of that growth is going to be a diminished lifestyle for those in the middle, right? But you're going to see growth at the services level, big declines in the middle, and strong, steady increases in digital elite. And of course, the work-life pioneers, are going to grow. They're going to be more and more people that are saying, you know what, W-2 employment's not for me. I'm going to either do some combination of gig work, or I'm going to start my own thing. I'm going to just do something different. And if I have to ratchet down my consumption, I'm going to do it. And the pandemic actually created, I use the metaphor of a sequoia tree, that when a forest fire is a wonderful thing because the cones of the sequoia tree, they break open, and because the forest has been decimated, the sunlight comes in and the seedlings grow. And that's really what kind of happened with the pandemic. Amongst all that devastation, a lot of people started to look at their lives a little differently and say, you know what, I want to do something different, and I don't really want to be subject to some company, some corporation that has no moral center, that's going to not give me any loyalty. With the next merger and acquisition, I'm going to go off and follow my own, my own path.
So it seems like there's both plus and a minus. Pluses, people are going to be starting their own thing, and hopefully that works out for them. And minuses, maybe technology would drive out a lot of the workforce.
One of the things I found interesting, when you look at the amount of work that we do in this country on the number of hours worked per employee, per person, and you look at, say, Germany. I mean, the Germans are working only 1,300 hours a year on average. People in Colombia and Mexico work about 2,200 hours a year on average. They're working their butts off. And the reason the Germans, which you always associate, or at least some associate with hard working, is that they're working very smart with automation. And so the real positive path for us is that we can direct this automation to allow us to work more smartly and more efficiently and have more time, better work-life balance. I'll end with one story I just told in a talk in New York, because I was born actually on the Upper West Side, about 2 blocks south of the Dakota, where John Lennon, famously lived. And that turned out to be the best address I'd ever have. Declining ever since. But when he was about 7, his teacher asked him, "What do you want to be when you grow up, John?" And he said, "Well, I want to be happy." The teacher said, "Well, you didn't understand the question." And John said, "You don't understand life." So the challenge for a lot of us that work in automation is to focus on how do we invest in automation, do the right thing to allow people to work, live a better life, and be happier. That's really what it should be all about.
True.
Agreed. I definitely think that there needs to be that kind of balance. But thank you so much, Craig. This has been so good, enlightening about the mental state. I like that what you mentioned about mental health and automation. the craziness of agentic AI and obviously what the future will look like. I'm gonna guess that anyone who wants to purchase your book can pre-order it on Amazon. Is there anywhere else they can pre-order it?
Correct.
Perfect.
Yep. Just random acts of automation will bring it up.
Perfect. So you can pre-order it on Amazon. You can also catch up with Craig on LinkedIn, and obviously on his socials. Just look him up. You can catch up with me and Sean on LinkedIn as well as read everything that I've written, as well as Sean sometimes on agentic AI and automation. Please feel free to leave us a review, share this podcast, whatever all podcasts to listen to. Also, you can watch us a little bit on YouTube on the Tech Targets High on Tech channel, and we will see you next time on the Targeting AI podcast. Thank you, Craig. We really appreciate it.